Thanks so much for coming out. I'm the name that's on your cool centerpieces.
Yeah.
This is a nice surprise for me. So, I am a writer, researcher, sometimes investigator. I don't get out into the field as much as I would like, but when I don't get out into the field, I'm actually interviewing people. So I talk to a lot of Mainers about the strange stuff that they see. And it's been enough to fill like 7 books so far. One is New Hampshire, so. But enough to fill. And I have a new book coming out next year as well, which is even more strange stories from Maine. And this one actually has a little bit of true crime, bizarre true crime, which is always kind of fun and interesting. A little tidbit on that. In the late 1800s, there was a woman who went missing. And 5-6 days later, she was found on top of a tree, alive. Has no clue how she got there. They've never been able to figure it out. I'm assuming it's some sort of fugue state that she had gotten into, how she got into the tree and survived for days and nobody found her. Strange, but that's just one of the many stories that I have in these books. I'm going to start off though with a story of my own that happened to me in 2003 in Portland. Anybody here familiar with flying humanoid creatures? Most notably the Mothman. So we're talking a large human-sized creature with even larger wings. I might have seen something like that. So I had woken up in the middle of the night and I lived in a converted house. So it was an apartment downstairs and an apartment upstairs in this converted house. And I lived on the 2nd floor. Woken up in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock, maybe 2, had to go to the bathroom. To get to the bathroom, you have to walk out of my bedroom, into the living room, into the kitchen, and then into the bathroom. When I was going from the living room into the kitchen, there's 2 big windows. And it's just a natural thing to look at as you step into the kitchen. So that's what happened. And through the window, on the eave that is just above the porch, I saw this silhouette of a figure crouched down on the eave, facing the parking lot. So it froze me in my tracks. And I'm standing there and, you know, I'm like about to step down into the kitchen. So my weight is shifting a little bit and the floor beneath me creaks just a little bit. And this creature's head cocked like that when when the creak happened. And it was almost like its ear was, a radar and like locked onto me. Also, its ear was pointed. I could clearly see it when it went like that. It was all pitch black, the creature. I couldn't see skin or fur or any features really, except on its back were these 2 huge wings folded neatly on its back. When it heard me and cocked its head, it then stood up. And a second later, its wings snapped out of its back and it sounded like a pitcher throwing a 90-mile-an-hour fastball. Just this smacking sound when the wings came out. And then it did this graceful nosedive off of the eave and flew around the building. I don't know what to make of that. I was terrified. And I went back to my bedroom. I did not go to the bathroom. And I turned all the lights on. And I put a funny DVD in. I can't remember what the movie was, but I put something funny in. And then I wrote everything down that happened. The next day, I approached the window and I'm looking out it to see if I can see anything on the eave that would, indicate that something had been there. So I opened the window, I opened the screen, and I'm sticking my head out. I'm not seeing anything, but I get the idea that, it flew around the back of the building. I'll go check over there. So I go downstairs and I go around to the side of the building, and there's a chain link fence because the railroad tracks were right there. I've never been back there, so I had no idea that there was a fence. So I couldn't get any further to see if there was anything. But it was certainly strange. Now, a little over 20 years later, somebody in Portland might have seen what I saw. I'm going to read a little portion from the book here about what they saw. Quote, okay, so about 4:45 this morning, heading into Falmouth from Portland, getting off exit 9, right before I hit the bridge, I noticed someone who I thought was parasailing or wing gliding, but it was moving super slow, like crazy slow. I didn't realize it was moving until I pulled over. It was very controlled and kept basically the same altitude the entire time. It was all black. No lights, no organic type of movement. I was genuinely spooked. I would just like to know whether or not this was a reasonable thing, or did I see a creature? End quote. As the crow flies, where this gentleman was is just about a mile from where my apartment building was. So is there some sort of black flying creature in Portland? Maybe. I don't know. But it's crazy. 20, 21 years later, somebody else saw it flying. But that's the first story. I want you to know that in between these stories, please feel free to raise a hand, ask a question, or if you have insight, have a story of your own to share, please do so. Anybody have anything to share right now or any questions? Yeah.
Basically, I've been to Portland multiple times, and literally, I've never even seen that.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people have. But keep your eye out if you go again.
I won't be going until next year.
Okay. Get your mom or dad to remind you. And you'll look up. Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to another story. Anybody here familiar with black-eyed kids, black-eyed children? Okay, a few. Now, for centuries, black-eyed entities have been discussed, like even in the Bible. But what I'm talking about are black-eyed kids, and there are modern-day encounters with them. And this all seemed to start in 1996 in Abilene, Texas. There was a gentleman, a journalist, his name's Brian Bethel. You can follow him on Facebook, seems like a really nice guy. But he was at this cinema complex, and part of this complex also housed his internet service provider, which I think was Cox Communications at the time. And he had pulled in there around 7 o'clock at night because he needed to pay his bill, and he was writing a check. Sitting in his car writing a check using the glow of the marquee from the cinema as his light. While he's sitting there writing it, he feels like somebody's staring at him. So he looks over through his driver's side window, and there's two kids standing there. One's a little taller than the other. They're both wearing hoodies. The hoodies are up. They appear to be maybe 12, 13 years old, and their heads are down. And he's like, oh, great. They're gonna ask me for money or something. So, little knock on his window. He rolls it down just about an inch or two. And he's like, yeah, what do you want? Mister, can you give us a ride? And he's like, to where? To our mother's house. What for? We want to go see the movie. So he looks over and he sees that the movie is Mortal Kombat. And the movie had already started like 40 minutes earlier. And it was the last showing, according to the marquee, that evening. And in his head, he's thinking about this all within, just a few seconds. But by the time he takes these kids, gets them to the mother's house, and they want to, get money for the movie, it's going to be over. So he's like, I don't think that makes sense. The movie's almost over. And then the kid who was talking looked up at him. And Brian said, this kid had all black eyes. No white, no iris, just all black eyes. And they said, what's the problem, mister? It's not like we're going to hurt you. And that really put him on edge. He had this overwhelming sense of dread come over him. And it got to the point, just a moment or so later, where he was feeling his hand, without his own movement, reaching out to open the door to let them in, almost like they Jedi mind tricked him to open the door. And he was fighting it, and he finally got his hand away from it. He's like, I'm sorry, no. And he rolled up the window, put it in reverse, and backed out as fast as he could. He whips the car around, and while he's driving out of that parking complex, he said the kids had disappeared. Now, later on, the next day, he went home and he posted this on an internet forum, a message board, and it went viral for its time. This went everywhere. And there have since been books, movies, comic books, and thousands of stories around the globe of people encountering black-eyed children. The typical trope of these stories is these kids coming to your door at night, and they're often seen on people's front porches. And this happened to a Bangor woman. What year was that? 2009. So this woman was sitting in her living room, cat on her lap, and she's reading a book, and it's about 10 o'clock at night. And her husband is working the late shift. While she's sitting there, there's a knock on the door. And she's like, who the hell's coming to my house at 10 o'clock at night? So the cat like stands up on her lap and hisses at the door and then jumps off and runs away. She's like, freaking cat. And so she gets up, looks out the peephole, and there's no one. So she's like, okay, that was weird. Well, she goes to sit back down, and before she can get her place in the book, ding dong, the doorbell goes off. It jumps her. So she goes and looks out the peephole again. Doesn't see anything, but she whips open the front door, and there's a screen door. And the light from the living room falls on this kid that's standing there. And she's like immediately relieved that it's a child. She's like, oh, but wait, it's a child. Something's wrong. It's 10 o'clock at night. So now she's on edge again. So she's like, are you okay? What's going on? And he looks up at her. And this kid has all black eyes. And he says, can I come in? Calm, scary. And like Brian, she has this overwhelming sense of dread come over her. And she's fighting her hand to not open the screen door to allow the kid to come in. Just then, the cat is back in the living room, sitting in front of the door, and it hisses at the kid. This causes her to turn and look at the cat, and it kind of snaps her out of this little trance that she was in. And she's like, nope, sorry, slams the door, locks it, and then waits for her husband to get home. And I'm just gonna read a little bit here about what she said about that. Trying to think where I could tell a story and go to the book. I think it's okay. We'll see how it goes here. All right. As soon as her husband got home, she told them everything. The cat's strange behavior before the knocks, the overwhelming fear, and the boy with the black eyes. She explained how the cat's hissing had snapped her out of her trance. If it hadn't been for the animal, she didn't even want to think what might have happened if she let the kid in. The awful feeling lingered long after the incident. It was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and prefers not to think about it. In the days that followed, the woman couldn't shake the encounter and avoided the front door after dark. On nights when her husband worked late, she found herself double and triple checking the logs. Even the cat seemed different, more skittish, and often staring at the door as if expecting another visitor. But none ever came. But she'll never forget the night the boy with the black eyes knocked on her door. Now, I might have had maybe an experience with the black-eyed kids. I'm not sure. You tell me after this little addendum to the story. This was about a year after this incident. It's from 2010. And I'm visiting a friend in Bangor. And I left kind of late. We had watched a movie, and it was about 1 a.m. And, we said our goodbyes, and then I left. And they told me after I left, they had gone to bed, and they started hearing soft knocking on their back door, which was the door that they used most often, not the front door. And they heard this insistent soft knocking, and it was constant. And they're like, what the hell is that? So she gets up and she goes across the hall, which overlooks the porch. And all she has to do is look down to see who's on the porch. But they were scared. So they looked out to the parking lot to see if my car was there, and maybe I had forgotten something, and I was trying to knock softly, not to disturb anyone. It was not me. So they just wouldn't look down. They tried, but they wouldn't look down. So they went back to bed, and they got on the phone and sent me a text message. And in the message, it's everything I've told you at this point, but they asked if it was me. And I said, no, I've been home, 5-10 minutes already. And they said that before they texted me, the knocking continued for another 2 or 3 minutes. That's a long time for someone just to be knocking on her door. Very odd. So my question to myself was I out there when they were, whatever was knocking on the door, did I cross paths with them? I don't know. And that's a big leap to go to black-eyed kids. I mean, who knows what the hell was knocking on the door? I don't know. But it's interesting that it was just a year later in the same town. But I thought that might be interesting. Any questions or thoughts on that at all? Yeah.
Basically, on one of my favorite YouTubers' videos, he was watching real life analog horror, and there was there was like a thing called the 6'7" kid. I'm pretty sure he had black eyes and he was like a real life creature. Literally.
I'll have to look that up.
He's really scary.
It sounds scary. It's a cool name too, the 6'7" kid.
Literally, he was in the basketball court, and right before he disappeared into nothingness, into the security camera, he said 6'7", and basically that's how he got the name the 6'7" kid.
Interesting. That's some cool lore. Thank you.
You have to look that up.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now I'm going to, since it's Halloween spooky season, I'm going to share a few ghost stories and a couple of them that have happened to me. So this was a long time ago. I was quite young, probably 7, 8 years old, and I'm from Fort Kent originally. And we had this family friend that lived in St. Francis, which isn't far from Fort Kent. And my mother liked to go there to visit and talk to her, and we called her Mimi. She wasn't a blood relative, but she was like a grandmother to us. And so my mother would be inside chatting with her, and my dad would be outside doing some work for her, like mowing the lawn, things like that. And my sister and I would be on the wraparound porch, just kind of playing around. But every once in a while, as kids do, I'd have to go to the bathroom. And I tried to get away with going outside, but I was often yelled at and told to go inside. But there was a reason I didn't like going inside. The upstairs of Mimi's house was scary. And if you stood at the bottom of the stairs and looked up, the upstairs had this blue hue to it. Like it was a different dimension or something. And I never understood why my folks or my sister never noticed it or never talked about it. But it was scary, why is it so weird up there? And my mother would say, oh, it's because she has nothing on the walls. Maybe that's a thing you say to a kid, I don't know, but that never made sense to me. So I had to go to the bathroom this time, and I'm looking up. And at the end of the staircase up top, there's a stand, and there's a picture on that stand. And it's Mimi's husband, who had since passed away. And he was a scary looking dude. I don't know if this was taken, just before he had passed or something, but he looked very gaunt. And he was wearing this suit and tie that looked much too big for him. And it was freaky. And I knew that I had to get upstairs as fast as I could, take a quick left into the bathroom, go really quick, and then run back downstairs. But I had to face this picture. So I have my plan in place, and I run up the stairs, and I can't, it's like an accident. You drive by, you have to look at it. So it's like, and then ran into the bathroom. So now I'm in there, I'm doing my business, and I get done, and I can hear somebody walking in the hallway on the other side of the door. I was like, Mom? No answer. It was like a movie. I could see the shadow of the 2 feet, I'm like, oh no. And I was scared. I was like, I gotta get out of here, And almost as if this thing knew that I was scared of it, it backed off. I could hear it walk down the hall. I'm like, this is my chance. So I open the door, and I'm looking, there's nothing. So then I open the door wider and I step out into the hallway, and there's nothing. But in the hallway where I'm facing is Mimi's bedroom. I'm seeing the blue hue, and around the corner where I think her bed is, I'm feeling the presence of something standing there. And I feel like it's hiding so it doesn't scare me. So I was like, thank you very much, and I ran downstairs. I asked my mother about it years later because I wrote this story in my first book from 2014. And so I wanted to ask her, get some more details, like was it a wraparound porch, stuff like that. And I was like, what was up with the blue hue? She's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I've never experienced that. But she's like, something weird did happen at Mimi's when I was young. My mother had gone over to spend the night. She was going to help her in the morning with some errands. I'm not sure what. But my mother is sleeping in the guest room, which is near the bathroom, and Mimi's in her room. And they had just gone to bed, so they're both still awake. And the hallway light turns on. And my mother is waiting to hear Mimi walk into the bathroom. But nothing happens. A few minutes goes by, and my mom goes, Mimi, did you turn the light on? And she yells from the bedroom. She's like, no, just something bad happened, that's all. And she's like, what? But the light, something happened to somebody, and the light turning on is a sign of that. And I was like, okay, click, the light goes off. The next morning, my mother is doing some chores. Mimi had to go into town. She comes back and tells my mother that the scuttlebutt at the store where she was that a young man had been driving out. Apparently there was a storm that night, and he crashed his car and died. And she told my mother that when he died, that's when the hall light turned on. And that always, sat with my mother, and it was the first time she shared it with me, and I thought that was really interesting, with me having kind of my own weird experience at Mimi's house. But yeah, that's the story of Mimi when I was young, and lovely woman, but that picture of her husband used to scare the hell out of me. Any thoughts or questions on that? Anybody here see a ghost before? Yeah, something.
One time I heard a ghost in my grandpa's basement. I'm not even kidding.
Wow, what did it sound like?
Basically, it was kind of like a normal ghost sound, but I know I heard it.
So is it ooh, or like
Yeah.
something like that? Maybe, sort of?
Mm-mm.
Well, it's not like it's been bothering you, so I would say.
Basically, I haven't heard. Basically, the only supernatural things that have happened to me since then are literally I saw tiger footprints in the snow. I heard an actual roar of a tiger once, and I'm pretty certain that one time I literally heard footsteps downstairs, but I decided to just plug my ears and start playing on my tablet.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea. And they didn't bother you, so that's good. Nothing to be afraid of. Yeah. So, I'd like to share another ghost story from my past. This was in the house I grew up in, which we had moved away from Fort Kent and live in the Bar Harbor area. My folks had bought a house in Trenton, Maine, if you know where that is. And so we're fast forward now, and I'm in high school. I think I'm like 16. And I get home from school, and we were kind of latchkey kids, my folks would get home around 6 or 7 or so. On this particular night, my dad had to go to Bangor, and he had a little chore to do while he was in Bangor. So I'm home after school, and I'm listening to music and doing my thing, when the phone rings, and it's my dad, and he asks me to go down into the basement and measure this fluorescent light bulb that had burned out, and he was gonna get another one. I was like, yeah, sure. So I'm on the phone with him, and I'm downstairs, and I measured the thing, and he's like, all right. And he's like, make sure you shut off the light and lock the door. We don't want the cats getting out. I'm like, okay. So I do all that. I'm on the phone with him while I do it. He can hear it. So a couple hours later, I'm in my room, and there's a knock on my bedroom door. And I whip it open, and it's my sister. And she's just a couple years older than me. And she's like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I was like, what? And she's like, the cellar door's open, the light was on, I had to go down and like chase the cats out of there. It was awful. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was down there earlier and I shut everything. I was just like, whatever. And I closed the door on her, because teenagers. Not my best moment, but So about an hour after that, knock on my door again. It was a little bit more forceful. So I whip it open again, thinking it's my sister, and it's my dad. He doesn't look happy. I'm like, what's up? And he's like, I told you to close the door and to shut the light off. I just had to chase the cats out of there. So my sister is hearing my dad yell at me, and she comes out of her bedroom, and she's like, Dad, when I got home, the door was open and the light was on, and I had to chase the cats out. And then I closed it and shut off the light. And he's like, we all just kind of looked at each other. And we didn't really talk about it after that. So I don't know what happened there.
Well, she had really smart cats.
Maybe the cats were super smart. I give it to them, because they were pretty smart. All right, let's get here. Now, my dad is a gigantic skeptic when it comes to everything paranormal. God love him, he supports me with my endeavors and what I do now. Like, this is what I do full time, and he's very supportive. A few years ago, he's going for a walk with my mother. They have this routine that they do to this day. They wake up super duper early to me. So it's about 4 o'clock, they're up. About 4:30, they go for a walk. And on their walks, because it's dark, they have their flashlights and all that good stuff. And they're just walking on the back road in Trenton. And they're going by this house that's less than half a mile from their home. And as they're going by the house, there's this shed. And my father sees this 7-8 foot tall white thing glide behind the shed. He said it was headless. He said it almost looked like the classic ghost, like a white sheep, but it was a little glowy, It wasn't, just a sheep. And he turns to my mother quick. He's like, look, what is this? And they turn to look and it's gone. And he's like, what the hell was that? So he's shining his light around the shed to see if he can see anything. And then he looks at the house, and there's this big bay window in the house where it looks into the living room. And there must have been a night light on or something, because there was a little bit of ambient light in the house. And he said he saw this black humanoid shadow thing darting around inhumanly fast inside their living room. And he's like, what the hell is it? Look, and it's gone. And so he says to my mother, he's like, I don't believe in this stuff, but I'm gonna have to tell my son. That was crazy. And I can't believe my mother, who's the believer, never saw that, which is wild. But just a year later, my dad is outside and he's shoveling. He's pushing snow from one side of the driveway to the other. And while he's doing that, there's this little thicket of woods that separates them and the neighbors. And it's really thinned out during the winter. And in the little woods area of this thicket, he sees this 4 foot tall thing with its arms out wide. And it's just standing still. And he says it's wearing a flannel plaid shirt and blue jeans. And it's standing like this, and it's got a pointy head. He didn't think it was a hat. It looked like a pointy head to him. And it just stood there and stared at him. And so he dropped the shovel and he went inside. About an hour later, he doesn't tell my mother because he's afraid she won't believe him. Which is too bad, because my mother totally would believe him, or at least wouldn't say anything rude, So about an hour later, they're inside. My mother's made tea and they're watching, American Idol or whatever the hell they watch. And she gets up to go to the bathroom, and he can't help but want to look outside and see if that freaking thing's still there. So he pulls back the curtain and he looks. It's even closer. And somehow it's staring right at him. It's almost like on the tree line, almost in the driveway, staring at him. So he closes the curtain quick. And he sits back down, and my mom comes back in. They continue to watch television. He's never seen it again. But about 2 years after that, he told me what happened. And I told him I would keep it secret, but it is in this book. Which he didn't seem to mind. But it's pretty wild. And my girlfriend and I have since labeled this thing the arms out man. So, for whatever that's worth. So, in my writing, as if you can see here, I do have a special interest in UFOs. My first book was called UFOs Over Maine. It took me 6-7 years to write. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, I finally get a manuscript together and still don't know what I'm doing, and I'm submitting it to a bunch of places, and I'm getting rejection letters or I'm just not hearing back. And finally, one day I get a letter saying, hey, we want to put your book out. And I was like, cool, okay. What do I do now? And so it was about, sending a contract over and reading through all that. And I didn't care. I just signed the thing, and it turns out it wasn't barely any money. It was basically like writing for free. But you could walk into a Walmart in New England and buy my book, which was cool. I just didn't make a whole lot of money from it. But which is fine. You live and learn and all that good stuff. But during the course of writing that book, I came across a really interesting story. And for some reason, the publisher didn't want to put it out. Well, 10 years later, last year, 2024, was the 10-year anniversary of my first book, UFOs over Maine. So I wrote a 10-year anniversary version. The original book had about 25 stories in it. This book has 400. And I continue to collect stories, and people continue to contact me about the things that they've seen. And since I was going to put this out, not with a publisher, but by myself, I was going to include that story. And it happened to this woman in southern Maine. It was an August evening, so it was still light out, and she was outside. And she was talking on the phone with her father, and she had her dog outside with her. Her boyfriend was in the house somewhere doing something. But while she's out there, her dog is just kind of sitting straight and like staring ahead. She's like, oh, you're being a weirdo. And she's continuing to talk to her dad. But then the dog starts to have this really low, guttural growl starting to happen. And it's staring intently at something. And she's like, what the hell is wrong with you? So she follows the dog's gaze. And across the yard, at the base of a tree, she claimed there was this alien kneeling down, looking directly at her. So she's on the phone with the dad, and she's like, I gotta go. So she starts to put the phone in her pocket, and that movement seemed to indicate to the dog, go and run after whatever this is. So the dog takes off running and barking, and this alien stands up. And she says it's about 8 feet tall. And it's really skinny and spindly, really thin arms and legs. If you know what Slender Man is, picture Slender Man without the suit. But this really tall, skinny thing, and it takes off running. The dog's running after it. While this thing is running away, it starts to disappear from the top down. It gets to the point where she's just seeing running legs, and then it completely disappears. At that point, the dog stops running, but is continuing to bark at, whatever it did. So I don't know if it cloaked itself or if it disappeared or what happened, but it freaked her out, and she had to wrangle the dog to get it back inside. She finally did that and then told her boyfriend what happened, and she was so scared that he believed her. And they went outside to look for footprints or anything, and they didn't see anything. And that's the story. That's it. And maybe that's why they didn't want to include it. It's just, short and sweet and to the point, and there's not a whole lot around it. But when I talked to her, which was like a decade after she had had this experience, she said to this day when she closes her eyes, she sees it, and it still scares her. And she's like, I get this question a lot, why me? I said, I don't know. It's almost frustrating to interview people because they do ask me questions like that, and I don't have any answers. All I can do is if you share your story and you don't mind me sharing it publicly, other people might hear it and maybe not feel so alone. That's kind of the best thing I could tell her, and that seemed to comfort her in a little way, because her story might be able to help somebody else, and I thought that was cool. But yeah. It was one of the good ones, and it creeps me out to this day, and I'm so glad that I was able to retell it in the 10-year anniversary of UFOs. Now we're going to take a hard left, okay? Have any of you heard of a frogman? I mean, the name is kind of what it is, but it's typically 5 or 6 foot tall, humanoid creature with a frog head and frog-like skin, but arms and legs and hands and all that good stuff. There's a very famous sighting that happened in Ohio in the town of Loveland. And they call it the Loveland Frogman. This happened in the 1950s. I've been obsessed with the friggin' Frogman since I started hearing about it. And I always wondered if there had been one reported in Maine. Well, the 1950s one, again, Ohio, this gentleman was driving along the banks of the Little Miami River, which is in Ohio. And the story goes that as he's driving, in some instances of the story, there are 3 creatures standing on the side of the road. In other stories, they're on top of this overpass that he drives under. Either way, they're all standing there, and one of them is holding this metal object in its hand. It has since become called a wand. And out of the wand were like sparks of electricity. You know, and he's driving, he's like, what the hell is that? So that was the initial story of the Loveland Frogman. They've created tourism over this, and there's a Frogman Festival now, you know, so there's a little statue in town. But in the 1970s, 2 police officers in Loveland, Ohio, also witnessed the Frogman. One of them fired its gun at it. When it fired its gun, it jumped over this guardrail, and they could see its hands grab the guardrail and jump over. Now, the years after that, these 2 police officers who saw it have gone back and forth recanting their stories and then saying, no, it did happen, and then taking it back again. So there's some controversy. In 2016, a college-age kid who was driving along the Little Miami River saw the Loveland Frogman in the water, and it was wading like up to its waist in the water. He took video of it. And you can watch this on YouTube. You can YouTube search for the Loveland Frogman 2016, and it'll pop right up for you. And in some of the video, in the original video, it's pretty dark and you're really seeing the big glowing eyes. But people have since taken this footage and lightened it up. And it's weird. It looks like a frogman walking in the water. I don't know what to tell you. But finding all those stories was just, you know, increasing my appetite to find a frogman story from Maine. And I searched high and I searched low, and I could just never find one until Thanksgiving of 2024. I'm actually working on this book. We've had our big meal, and I'm now home, and I get the laptop out, and I'm writing the book, and I'm doing some research on this Maine author, D.L. Susie or Saucy. And as far as I can tell, he put out a series of books. Only one of them was about legends in Maine. The other stuff is like survival books, because he's a bit of a survivalist. But he also has a book of poems, a book of fiction, you know, so he was like this well-rounded author. But he had this one book, and the cover is of Colonel Buck's tomb in Bucksport that's got the witch's foot on it. And I remember thumbing through this book at a Mr. Paperback or whatever when it came out, you know, like a bunch of years earlier. And I'm watching this video of this author, and he was doing a promotional video for this book. And just casually he says, and you know, the frog people of Maine. I'm like, what? I double tap the screen, it rewinds 20 seconds, you know, blah, 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 frog people of Maine. I'm like, whoa, I wish I had that book. And so I continue to listen, and this book, the story in his book is based off of this other author named George Cleveland. And he's got a book called Maine in Verse and Story. And it's a book of poems and stories. And there's this one story in it that has like a modern title and like a modern telling of this really strange case. And it's called the Remick case. Remick being the last name of this person. The person's name is Silas Remick, and this happened in the late 1800s in western Maine, in a place called Devil's Lake. And if you search for Devil's Lake in Maine now, nothing comes up. I think there's one in Wisconsin, but maybe there was a lake called Devil's Lake much earlier, you know, in western Maine that has since been renamed. I don't know. But the story goes that this gentleman named Silas Remick, he's about 25 years old. His father has since passed away, and he lived on a homestead with his mother and his siblings, and you know, they worked at the homestead. And since his father passed away, he really wanted to go check out Devil's Lake because there were rumors that weird stuff happens over there, and don't go. There's a tributary that's closer than Devil's Lake, and that's where everybody fished and did their things and got their water. But Devil's Lake was a bit of a hike away, and he was bound and determined to go. So he does. And it's the best fishing he's ever had in his life. And he comes home, and he's got about 10 trout with him. His mother's like, oh my goodness. And he's like, I know, Devil's Lake, who would have thunk it, you know? So a couple days go by, and he can't stop thinking about the lake. Like, it's bothersome. And he's like, I'll just go fishing again and get it out of my system. So he goes, and again, it's the best fishing he's ever had. But while he's up there, over on this far ridge, and it looks like there's a cavernous area, pretty far away though, you know, a couple football fields away, he can see these two people standing up, and they might be holding spears or something, and they're just watching him. He's like, well, they're over there and I'm over here, and I'm sure it's fine. So he continues fishing. Everything's going fine. He goes home. Mom's like, oh my God, this is crazy. But he can't stop thinking about the lake. When he's not at the lake, he's thinking about the lake. It's like it's drawing him to it. So he goes again in a couple days, and he does great fishing again, and he sees these things again, and they're a little closer, and they kind of look like people, but maybe not. But he's like, they're over there, I'm over here. So he goes home. He begins to go to the lake every day. And his mother has to talk to him and say, you're not keeping up with your responsibilities here. You have to stop going to the lake. He's like, you're right, I gotta do better. But he doesn't. He goes to the lake the next day. This time, while he's at the lake, he's caught a whole bunch of trout, and he's just about to leave when these two creatures pop right up on the path leading out from Devil's Lake. And he said that they looked like frog people. He had the faces of frogs, their skin was green and a little scaly, and they looked wet. And they apprehended him. They grabbed him by each arm, and they led him to the edge of the lake. Before he put a foot in, he passes out. He wakes up, and he doesn't know how long later, and he's in this dark area, this dark room or something, and there's this window of light in front of him, but his vision's blurry, and he has really labored breathing, and his arms are up, and he realizes he's underwater, and he's in this room underwater. And through this window, as his vision clears, he says he almost sees like this metropolis of frog people swimming by. They have shopping bags, and he's like, what is happening? And then the door unlocks, and he's like, oh, and it's two of the frog people, and they take him somewhere, and just before he leaves this room, he passes out again. And he wakes up, and he's back in the room again, and he's like, what? Where am I? What's happening? This continues to happen, where they come in and they take him somewhere, but he always passes out. He doesn't know where they go. But sometimes he passes out after he's out of the room. And sometimes it's really bright above him. And in his opinion, when it's bright above him, he might be closer to the surface of the water. So he devises a plan. He's got this old pickle jar in his jacket, and that's what he was snacking on when he got apprehended. He peels off the label, and he's got a pencil, and finds that he can write underwater. Very convenient for the story. And so he's writing underwater, and he's writing a letter to his mother. And it's everything I've told you up to this point. But I'm going to read the end of this letter for you. Bear with me here. Where the hell's number 6? Okay, quote, I do not ever expect to come back to the world again. If it were not for my mother, I would not so much care, but I know how she has suffered by my actions. But this is how it is. I had no power to prevent it, but perhaps someday they'll let me come back. If my mother is alive, tell her this, and I hope she will forgive me and understand. I'm getting to the end of my diary, so keep far away from the Devil's Lake. I wish I had. Goodbye to the world. God help me. Silas. Unfortunately, his mother had since passed away, and when these two fishermen happened upon this letter, they could only deliver the news to his surviving siblings, but his mother never got to know her son's fate. But that's the story of the frogmen of Maine, and I couldn't believe I finally found this story. Now, I know it sounds a lot like lore, but when you look through this book, it's the one story that seems to have a lot of facts in it. It's titled in a modern way. Really interesting. And I'm just so glad that I found a frogman story for me. Any thoughts on that, or anybody ever see a frogman? I'm looking for frogman stories. No? You? No?
Basically, I don't know why did you not just call the instant you heard about that story? Why did you not just call the FBI so you can capture the frogman and do experiments
You're right.
on them?
You're right. That's my bad. I'll own that. Now, in another water area in Maine, this one is real. It's the Kunduskeg stream in Bangor. And in 2019, a gentleman and his girlfriend saw something really strange there. It might be extraterrestrial in nature, or maybe they're little fairies, I'm not sure, but they had spent the day fishing at Kunduskeg, and they had set up a tent to stay the night, and they were gonna fish some more in the morning. I'm not aware of camping being allowed at the Kunduskeg, so I don't know if they were maybe more transient and they were spinning the story as we were there to fish, which is possible, but nice enough people, and I took their story and considered it. So it's nighttime. It's about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and his girlfriend is lying next to him, and she is laying on her belly, and she has her face kind of like tucked into him, and he's like still kind of sitting up enjoying the night. The tent is very sheer, so he can see the stars and the moon, and while he's looking up, he sees these 2 white lights really high up in the sky. And they start doing these aerial dances, like figure eights and all these cool things. And he's like, wow, this is crazy. Are these UFOs? Like, what is this? And as he's having that thought, 3 more lights come into his field of view, and they're much lower. And he's looking at them, and they're red and blue and green, and they're just these balls of light. And he's trying to shake his girlfriend, like, you have to see this. And she's like, I don't want to look. It's like, okay, but this is crazy. And so these 3 lights are hovering right above the tent. And as he's sitting there, they enter the tent. And he doesn't understand how they just came through the top of the tent, but they did. And he sees that they're just about this big, just like the size of a quarter. And there are 3 of them, and they're right in front of him. And he's like, what the hell are these? There's no noise associated with them, but there are these 3 balls, and they're kind of just little dancing around right in front of him. And then the red one comes forward, and now that's the closest one to him. And it shape shifts, he says, into this little fairy thing with like dragonfly type wings, and its arms and legs are proportionate to it, and it's got this face. And he's looking at it, and he's scared, but he's fascinated, and he's shaking his girlfriend. He's like, you have to look at this. This is insane. So he keeps looking, and he's concerned, and she's like, no, I can't look. You know, she's really upset and refuses to look, and she's scared. And like almost the fairies or whatever these are knew that they were scaring this woman. It shape-shifted back into its little orb thing and backed out of the tent. And he's like, well, they're gone now. And she's like, okay. And she still doesn't turn to look. But these other orbs go up to the white lights, and now they're all together, and then they take off together. And that's it. Just a strange experience at the Kunduskeg. But about 100 years earlier, 4 indigenous men went on a hunting trip on the Kunduskeg and maybe came across a version of these fairies. But this story isn't as pleasant. I'm so sorry, but they're out and they're hunting and they're fishing, and on their 2nd or 3rd day, they get to this area, and on shore there's all these little footprints. And they're like, what the hell is that? And they finally see what might be making these footprints. And it's this little fairy goblin type thing. They said it's just about 18 inches tall, not very big. And it saw the hunters and took off running. And they ran after it and captured it. And this little thing tells them that, we are friends with these giants, so you don't want to mess with us. And they're like, okay, you're friends with giants, all right. And they're like, no, if you put me down and let me go, in 2 days' time, I'll introduce you to the giants. And they said, okay, come right back here and we'll meet. So during these 2 days, the men continue to hunt and fish. And as they're hunting and fishing, they come to this area and they see some smoke rising above this ridge. And so the leader of these men says, you two go up there and see what that is. What's that all about? So they go up there and they find this wigwam. And inside this wigwam is this giant cauldron. And it's not smoke, it's steam from this cauldron. And they can't even stand and look over the cauldron. It's so large that they have to climb this ladder that's there. And they look in, and they're very disturbed by what they see. There's body parts, and maybe of the child kind. They go back and report this whole thing to their chief, and they're all scared. And they said, well, in 2 days' time, we'll go ask the giants if this is their stuff. They meet the giants, and the giant says, yes, the little fairies or whatever the hell they are, they go and find kids and push them in the water. And then the giants come and get them after they've passed and make their stews. And they meet every couple of months to have these meals. Yeah. So very, very different from the other Kenduskeag Extreme story. But that story is also in the book, and it goes into much greater detail if that's your thing. If not, you can move on. Yeah.
How much of a skeptic would you say you are? Do you believe most of the stories that you like? Do you only include ones that you believe in?
No.
Or do you have ones that you just think are really cool and nifty, would be neat if true?
Yeah, that's more so it. It's whatever I find to be like really bizarre. Because it's tough to read just lights in the sky stories. They're interesting, but a light in the sky is a lot different than a landed UFO and a creature being seen. Right. So if I can find that story and share it, I will. Now, I do sort of have this percentage game that I play. And I would say about 10% of the people I talk to, or stories that I read, I don't believe at all. And I would say there's about 75% of the stories where I believe that the person believes it. And that's good enough for me. If you believe it, all I am is a non-judgmental, kind ear to bounce stories off of. And I make sure that's apparent before I meet with somebody. Like, I want you to know this is about you and your story. And if you allow me to share it, my books or podcasts or whatever, I like to leave it up to the reader to decide whether it's true or not. So I try to be unbiased as I can in these books. The remaining, 15%? The remaining 15% or so, I believe that a truly unexplained encounter happened. And so those are, it's more rare to have somebody that I think is lying. Like, that's more rare than finding somebody that I do believe, although it still is a small number. But yeah, there are some stories that I 100% believe to be true. Yeah.
How many of these are video proof? Because I would just flick my camera. Beep.
Yeah, not many of them. Not many of them at all. In this new book that I'm working on, I'm including QR codes that you can scan with your phone that do take you to some video evidence that you can see, which is cool. Yeah.
How does the cryptozoology community deal with AI now? As far as like video proof, anybody can make a weird creepy video.
Yeah.
That is AI.
Yeah, it's frowned upon, as a writer and artist myself, I don't like it, my girlfriend painted this cover, I try to stay away from AI. I don't use AI to assist me to write. And for videos of UFOs and cryptids and other strange things, ghosts, AI is always a possibility, so it's tough to even trust that these days. Which is why I'm more focused on people. It's about people, not proof for me.
You should make an entire YouTube channel about these different supernatural occurrences.
I should do that.
Yeah. You have a podcast, don't you?
I do, yeah. But you're right, I should do that. Yes.
You ever hear of orange discs and all that stuff.
I have, yeah. Orange, I'm hearing a lot about orange orbs.
Or, yeah,
Yeah.
it's like discs.
Okay.
My mom and her aunt saw one
Cool.
years and years and years ago. They were on the road. They thought a transformer was on fire, so they stopped. Because it was like a round glow above the light pole. So they didn't want to go near it. It stopped and was watching it to make sure it wasn't gonna, explode on them, because they didn't want to go by it. Well, they were watching it. I remember this day, because they told us about it. They said, it was freaky.
Yeah.
And my dad says, oh, it's the government. So they saw this orange disc. It was like 10 feet above the pole. And they were like, what? And they got looking at it. And it was humming. Because that's why they thought it was a transformer doing something. Then all of a sudden it just went
Wow.
like in a split second it took off. Yeah,
Wow.
so my father said, yeah, government's up to it.
Yeah.
He blamed it on that government,
Yeah,
so.
I don't blame him. Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
I don't know exactly what category this would fall into. I don't think it's really a ghost story or whatever, but my mom had a stroke when I was in my early 30s, and she lived with us for quite a while. And she had this, I remember it growing up, it was a 7-day clock, and it was mandatory in our house that every 7 days you wound it, and the thing had never stopped. It was almost like ritual. When she passed away, we had wound the clock like no more than like a day and a half before. And we went to the hospital, and of course she passed. And when I got home, she passed at 9:20. When I got home and looked at the clock on the mantle, the clock had stopped at 9:20. That clock had never stopped in 30 years.
Wow.
It was not due to be wound.
Wow.
It still sets a 9:22.
It's still, I never wound it again. It's
Wow.
even to this
That's
day.
cool.
But, I mean, I don't know what kind of story that is, or it could just be a complete coincidence.
Of course,
But it's a very
That's very specific. Yeah.
coincidence.
For me, I would classify that under like some sort of ghost story, but that's
Yeah.
super interesting.
Yeah, and so and when her dad would say, well, so are we gonna wind it again? I said, you touched that clock. That's all there is to it. I mean, if it was her, then, we're just gonna, it's always was just best to do what my mom wanted to do. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd just like to know that maybe some of the rest of you thought of this too, as you were hearing that. That's a story that I've encountered, over the years, and I've seen it written down. And there's, in fact, there's a song, I guess as far as I know, it would be just considered an American folk song. My grandfather's clock. My grandfather's clock was too tall for the shelves, so for 90 years, it stood on the floor, and something or other, when the old man died, it stopped. And I often wondered if that song, whoever came up with it, was, based on a true story, or just based on the fact that we seem to hear that exact story, like, a lot. That's something that happens.
And with any, I mean, you have to wonder what the significance of it is, yes.
Yeah.
What it means.
For me, it almost sounds like a message to who's survived, like, I'm okay, I'm gone, something to that effect, but it feels like it's a message for you.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but when she said that, it come to mind. My father was a beekeeper, and when he was on his deathbed, because he always kept his bees meticulous, he loved his bees. So, and it just brought, when she was saying that, it was like weird. My brothers always said that this was weird, because he said when he was on his deathbed, he kept waking up and saying, my bees. And then he'd say, oh, it don't matter.
Wow.
Because he knew he was dying anyway.
Yeah.
Now, after his death, my brothers went out to go, open them up, get them ready for the spring and everything. All his bees were dead,
My goodness.
all of them.
Wow.
He could, yeah.
Huh.
My brother said, it was just so weird. They said they didn't even touch him, they didn't
Yeah.
want to touch him.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, and he kept waking up saying, my bees. And then he'd say, oh, it don't matter.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
My brain just goes to think that a lot of our energy gets put into the things that we touch and that we involve
Sure.
ourselves in with every day. And that when they pass, that energy is going back into whatever,
Yeah.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
If that makes sense at all.
I think it does. And we all take things differently. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I have my own thoughts on death or what happens after. I'm not even convinced like ghosts are dead people. Like the spirits of dead people. I don't know if it's maybe some sort of interdimensional rip or something, and we can see them sometimes because there's a rip in our understanding of the world, and we can peek in. I don't know. Yeah.
She was talking about the clock stopping. One of my friends, he said that when his mom died, the watch stopped on the exact sun that she passed away.
Yeah. It sounds
So-
like a
It's similar to
familiar
what she
thing.
was
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah, that's really interesting.
There were a lot of weird stories around my mom was a little out there, but, when she was in the hospital, she developed, right before she passed, she developed a special relationship with this nurse that saw her. And my mom, again, had a stroke. And so she could not speak. She had a vocabulary left of about maybe 15 words. I will tell you now, no one's ever gonna beat me at charades again, because I spent the better part of 5 years trying to figure out what the hell she was trying to do. So we finally came up with this book. This was 30 years ago. And I made pictures and put them in a thing she asked for on a regular basis, and I put them in a binder so she could, and she got very good at knowing exactly what page everything was on. And she'd go, she was, yeah. Anyway, she didn't speak. And when she was in the hospital, the nurse came in the night she died. The nurse came in and said, all right, Rose, is there anything else I can get for you tonight before, And she said, my mom looked up at her with the biggest smile on her face and looked at her and said in a perfect sentence, no, I'm gonna go see Joe tonight.
Wow.
And Joe is my dad, and he had
Wow.
passed away 10 years before. But the fact that, yeah. She,
Okay, don't fight that.
not only, I guess, knew she was gonna pass, but in some weird thing in her brain, she had enough to get that sentence out, even though
Yeah.
she could not communicate anymore. She said she just looked up at her with the sweetest smile on her face, which again, kind of not my mom. And said, no, I'm gonna go see Joe tonight.
Wow. That's really cool. Yeah.
We have, excuse me, a family story. We laugh about it, it's true, and it happened recently. My sister-in-law was in the nursing home, a nursing home, and she had supper, which she didn't like, and she didn't eat much, and she said, well, I'm going to bed. I'm dying anyway. So they helped her to bed and everything, and she said, they said, you all set for the night? I told you I'm dying. Well, don't how, oh, don't say that, you're fine, I know you didn't eat your supper, would you like some ice cream? Why the hell would I want ice cream? I told you I'm dying. So they said, okay, so they went and got the charge nurse and came and took her vital signs and everything, and the charge nurse said, absolutely nothing wrong, vital signs are fine, she's fine. So they said, okay, Betty, you're fine. Well, you may think so, but I know I'm dying. And so they said to her, Betty, now just relax and go to sleep, and if you're not hungry, that's okay, we'll see you in the morning. I told you, and I'm not going to tell you again, I'm dying. And she died.
Almost
Right
inspired by
there.
Wow. Good for her. Went out on her own
Way to make a point.
That's funny. Wow. That's great. Anybody else have a story or anything? Oh, yeah.
You should make books about horror movies like The Exorcist and The Conjuring.
You're right.
And you should force my mom to read The Exorcist book if you ever make it. She's been terrified of that book for decades. Or the movie.
It's a scary book.
It is.
When I was a kid, my mom told me not to watch TV late at night. And I got up in the middle of the night and I went and was channel surfing and found the story with the little girl, and I got scared of the story and went to bed, and in the morning my mom woke up and found the TV on, and I had told her what I was watching, and I said, yeah, this girl was jumping on the bed and her head started spinning around, and my mom knew instantly what movie that was.
Yeah.
I had turned on The Exorcist in the middle of the night. I was like 6 or 7. So it scared me, and I've never seen the movie.
It scared my mother too. Like, she was not allowed to go see it, but she snuck with some friends to go see it, and like to this day, she still considers it one of the scariest movies. And she got me into horror movies, my mom. And in my opinion, there's a lot scarier stuff out now, but she's like, nope, The Exorcist is the scariest.
Well, for its time.
For its time, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. Anybody see Weapons? Came out recently?
We have it on our list of 5.
Okay, when they get it, you
Yeah.
gotta see
We haven't seen it yet, though.
But I'm aware of it.
It's wild, and it's probably one of the best movies. Now,
We're getting it to the library soon.
Good. And you should also get Good Boy. I don't know if you've heard of this one,
Yes.
but it's a
Wait,
ghost
I've
story.
heard of that.
Good. It's a ghost story from the dog's perspective.
Oh.
And it's so well done, and the dog is a good little actor, and it's actually scary. It's great, so you gotta get Good Boy too.
Also, random shout out to our Fright Club book club. If anybody is interested in the spooky and the creepy, we do that as well. Sign up upstairs.
Very cool.
Lots of sidetrack. Did you have any other stories you wanted?
I do. I have another story. If we're closing this out.
Oh, we got another half an hour.
Okay, well then I have a few more stories. I got stories for days. So. But I'm going to tell another one about myself, and it leads into a different story. So this was 2020 in February. So this was like before the world changed. And it seems like a lifetime ago at this point, but it was 5 years ago. But February of 2020, I'm driving on a back road in Trenton, going to visit my folks. And I had a long day, and I was going there afterwards. It was about 6:45 p.m. at night, and about 300 yards in front of me, on the side of the road, I see this 5-6 foot tall thing, almost like it was made of sticks. If any of you are familiar with the Blair Witch Project, they made these little stick figures, maybe like picture a 5-foot version of that for the younger people. Guardians of the Galaxy, Groot, the creature Groot, which is like a tree creature. It looked like that, and it was pitch black, but like shiny black, inky black. And when my lights shined on it, it like reflected the light. And its arms and legs were made of like twisted sticks. It was really strange, and it didn't have antlers, but it had these 2 sticks sticking straight out of its head, like straight out, almost like a weird crown or something. And I watched it take this exaggerated step over there was like a gully on either side of the road, and it took this step over that and walked into the woods. This all happened in a matter of like 3 seconds while I'm driving, and I see it step into the woods. So I come upon the area really quickly as I'm driving. It's a back road, so I just stop my car in the middle of the road. There's no place to pull over, but there's no cars. So I put it in park, and I roll down my window to see if I could hear something crunching in the snow in the woods. I didn't hear anything. But just a moment later, I am hit with this awful stench. It's like rotting meat, sulfur maybe. And I've heard of that in people having encounters with Bigfoot, that they stink really bad. Even some demonic encounters, people have claimed that there's this really awful sulfur type smell. I've never experienced for myself, but I did that night. And it was so bad that I had to roll down all 4 windows to continue my drive just to get the smell out of the car. And when I got there to my folks' house, I like told my mom what happened, and then I wrote it all down and I emailed it to a buddy so they could have it. And I just wanted it fresh. Like when you're an investigator and a writer of this stuff, it's almost annoying to have your own encounter, you know, because you want to be unbiased, but I'm very much human anytime I see something. So I wanted to write it down as fresh as possible without, you know, any embellishments or anything. So the next day, I start researching the area because I never thought to research like around where I grew up and where my folks live. So I'm researching that, and in 1997, there was a UFO encounter on the same road less than a mile from where I saw this creature. And what happened was there was this gentleman who was driving these two women. I think one was his girlfriend and one was her friend. And he was dropping her off just down the road from where I live, or my folks live. And while they're driving, they see this UFO hovering over the water in Trenton. And they're watching it. And as they're about to go by it, the UFO stops hovering and starts pacing them. And it descends a little bit. It's a little, just a hair over the tree line. And then it crosses the road and is now directly above them. So they're all kind of looking out the window at this thing. It's really low. And the girl's like, this is amazing, but like I have to go home. Like I have to be dropped off right now. So he pulls over, she gets out, and she steps back and is looking at this UFO that's over the car. And so he wants to get out too and sees it. So he puts it in park and gets out. And he's looking up at the UFO. And there's light emanating from it, but like it's not shining on them. He even lifts his arm, and it's not illuminating his arm at all. But there is light coming from it. And so he looks up through or into the bottom of it, and he says he can see like an array of weird looking pipes in like geometric patterns, and this dull yellow light is on, and that's all he can see. And almost like the UFO got bored of them, it ascended, went back over the water, and then took off as fast as it could, it seemed. And so that was one story I found. Another one was from a gentleman who had messaged me and said, I live on blah, blah, blah road in Trenton. That's the road my folks live on. And I was like, what number, blah, blah, blah road? And I'm like, that's next door to my folks. I didn't tell the kid this, but I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. And he said he was walking that road one night, just going home, and he saw what he thinks was a Wendigo type creature. And he said it had antlers. And true Wendigo encounters, they don't have antlers. So I don't know if he was kind of influenced by pulp culture and Wendigos, but typical Wendigos described by indigenous people do not include antlers. But anyways, this is what he claimed he saw. And Wendigos seem to be these extremely thin creatures, and there's this hunger where they see something and they need to consume it, but it's energy, you know, not it's flesh and blood. And he said that he had this overwhelming feeling of dread, and then it stepped over the gully like it did in my story and walked into the woods, and he couldn't hear it. I thought that was really interesting. I did not share my story with him, but getting his story, I was like, that's really interesting and very similar, at least mostly similar to the encounter I had. But that was all just in little Trenton, Maine, and I wouldn't have known that story unless, you know, without me seeing that weird stick figure thing. So, yeah. Any thoughts on that or questions? You want another strange ghost story? This is very modern. It's from a book that's not even out yet. And I call it Death of a Clown. And this happened in Wells, Maine, so pretty far south. And there's a Hampton Inn and Suites in Wells. And on this particular day, not that long ago, a family had rented out the event room of the Hampton Inn and Suites. And it's typically rented out for like business meetings and things like that. But on the weekends, it is rented out for family reunions and birthday parties and things like that. So they had rented it for a birthday party for their kid. The event's going great. They even hired a clown, and the clown is entertaining the kids and all that good stuff. And you know, an hour or two into this party, the clown has to go fix his makeup. And so he goes up to the third floor and goes to a room to fix his makeup. And it's not known if he had rented this room you know, for part of his stay, or if the family or the hotel provided it as like a staging area for him to get ready. But it was this room that had all of his stuff in there, and he went there and fixed his makeup. And he got done, and he goes to the elevator and hits the button, and he's waiting. The door opens, and he steps in, but there's no elevator. He falls to the basement to his death.
What?
And so that was obviously quite tragic. And everything was stopped at that point. And it was pretty horrific. Now, fast forward a couple of years. And there's a woman from Massachusetts who has rented a room on the 3rd floor. And her first night, everything was fine. The second night, she wakes up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. And she turns on the light, and in the mirror, she claims, is a clown's face. And its lips have like smeared paint or something on it, and it looks a little weird, maybe a little like it had been in an accident or something. And she saw it, and it scared the hell out of her, so she shuts off the light and immediately calls the front desk and explains that there's an intruder in her bathroom. And they're like, well, get out of the room. So now she's in the hallway, and they send up security, and they come in and they look in the room, and there's nothing. So she explains what she saw. And the security guys, who happened to be working a couple of years earlier, remember the clown story, the clown that fell to his death, and they're wondering if it was that same clown, the ghost of this clown. So this woman, she cuts her stay short. They offer her a different room, and she's like, nope, I'm going back to Massachusetts. Yeah. So apparently she was a blogger and drew what she saw and held it up on a YouTube video to show people. This channel has since been deleted, which really sucks because I really wanted to see that picture, but that's the story of a death of a clown in the Hamptons Inn and Suites in Wells. Now, I did some research, obviously, to see if there's any truth to the story. I mean, obviously that's got to be documented somewhere. But there's been no report of a death ever happening at the Hampton Inn Suites, no death of a clown, no death in the year that this happened, recorded in Wells, Maine. The only thing that was recorded there was a issue that they had with somebody that was in local politics that was kind of unsavory, but nothing in regards to the death of something at this birthday party. So where this came from, how this came into existence, I don't know, but I think the story is fascinating, and I had to include it in this new book. But pretty wild. And yeah, I wish I could corroborate some of the story, but I can't. So, yeah. What else we got here? Okay. So in the town of Tremont, which is on Mount Desert Island, this happened again fairly recently, I think 2021. This boy would often go to his babysitter's house after school. He was also kind of a latchkey kid. His mom worked late, single mom. And she kind of had like this standing reservation for this babysitter. He would just go there after school, and she would take care of him until mom came. Well, mom forgot to call the babysitter one day. So the kid is at the babysitter's house, and he's knocking on the door, and he's like, where is she? You know? And then the curtain moves, and he sees the face of an old man. And he's like, oh, that must be her dad or her grandfather or something. But he doesn't let him in. So he's like, what the hell? So he knocks on the door again. The face comes and looks again. And then slowly, he hears the lock unlock. And then the door creaks open, like a scary movie. It creaks open slowly, but the kid's not scared. You know, he's none the wiser. And so the door opens, he walks in, and he's like, where'd the hell the old guy go? And he can hear movement or something happening in the kitchen. And he's like, oh, she or he is probably in there getting me a drink or a snack. And they'll be out in a second. He's waiting. He's standing in the foyer, like, hello? And there's nothing, there's no sound. Is anybody in there? So he sticks his head in the kitchen. There's no one. And so now he's tired. So he's like, I'm gonna go take a nap. So he goes up to the babysitter's room. Without taking his jacket or his shoes off or anything, he just lies in her bed and falls asleep. He wakes up to somebody shaking him awake, and it's the woman, the babysitter. And she's like, what the hell are you doing here? And he's like, you're supposed to babysit me. What time is it? And it had been a couple of hours. And he's like, you're supposed to babysit me. And she's like, your mom never called me. And she's like, well, come on, let's call your mom. And she gets his coat off of this hook that's in her room. And he's like, I never took my coat off. And he was so small that he couldn't even reach the hook. So she's like, okay. She's putting his coat on. She's like, was that your grandfather who let me in? And she thought like he knew where the key was and let himself in. But no, he's telling her that this older gentleman had let him in. And I guess while he was sleeping, took off his coat and hung it up for him. And she's like, no, nobody like that lives here. And she's like, well, your grandfather or somebody was here. And they're like, man, again, the kid, none the wiser. He's not scared. He doesn't think it's a ghost. And she's like, this is freaking weird. But that's the story of the boy and the babysitter. And again, short and sweet, to the point. And he's a little bit older now, and she told him the story in a different perspective to be like, nobody like that lives here. And he got a little bit scared after that, which is unfortunate because she just scared him for no reason. But that's the story of the babysitter. Yeah, talk about frog people. Good frogs, or what you call somebody that lives in your house without you knowing it.
Frog.
Yeah.
There's a movie about that.
There is.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, it's a fantastic movie. Helen Hunt.
What was it called again?
I See You or
I
something.
See You, yeah,
something
something like that, yeah.
You must see it. Do you have it here?
Yeah, I think we
actually
didn't know, tell me.
Okay. You must see it. It's scary and it kind of plays out like a ghost story at first, and then you see what actually happened. I'm telling you about it. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
I got an idea of what you can watch if you ever want to get scared. Watch Life of Luxury. It's rated R.
Whoa.
I watched it one time on my favorite YouTuber's channel because I didn't know it was rated R, and literally halfway through I was screaming and freaking out. I literally started doing cartwheels off the coffee table.
Wow.
Monitoring what he's doing.
Watch it a little closer.
That's wild. Okay, so have you folks heard of the Dog Man? No?
No?
Okay. A dog man is, think of a werewolf, but a dog man is perpetually in that state. There's no shape-shifting back to a human. So think of a dog man as maybe like a Bigfoot, but a different species, some sort of canine species. And in the early 1990s, there was this woman named Linda Godfrey from Wisconsin. And she has since passed away, RIP to Linda. She's a wonderful woman. And she was a journalist working for the local paper, and she had gone to the sheriff's office to talk about a recent accident that had happened. She was trying to get some info from it. While she was there talking to him, she noticed a folder on his desk that said werewolf. And she's like, what the hell's that? And they're like, well, you can look through it if you want. But people on this very specific road, Bray Road, in this small town, Elkhorn, maybe, Wisconsin, on this very specific road, people were seeing this dogman werewolf type thing, like crossing the road, sometimes standing on the side of the road. Like there were hundreds of reports, and he was just taking them and writing them down, and he doesn't know what the hell to do with them. So he gives them to Linda. Linda starts this whole new career writing and interviewing these people that have seen werewolves or dogmen-like creatures. Not just in Wisconsin, she started traveling the United States and then the entire globe, interviewing people that have had encounters with dogmen. And Maine, of course, is no different. And I spoke to a gentleman in 2017 who claimed to have seen one. I call this story the kangaroo because of how this thing looked at first. So this happened about a decade before I talked to him, so I think it was 2007, 2006 when he had this encounter. But he worked the overnight shift, and he had a little boy at the time, and his wife, and they had a little puppy. And he gets home in the morning, and they're eating breakfast, and he's like, hey, you guys want to go camping today? They had an RV, and she's like, well, you just got out of work. He's like, I can sleep later. He was kind of full of energy. And he's like, I can sleep when we get there, and then I'll start the grill, and we'll have lunch, and all that good stuff. So they went to Baldwin, Maine, and there's this little RV area. And so they get over there, and he sets up the grill and all that good stuff, and then goes to take a nap. Well, he wakes up to the smell of charcoal, And he realizes that his wife didn't want to wake him, and she had started the grill for him. And the puppy had jumped on the bed and actually woke the guy up. So he gets up and he gets out there and he starts making patties, and he's wrapping bacon around hot dogs, and he's putting them on the grill. And in front of him in this open area is his kid and the puppy, and they're running around chasing each other. Mom's inside like making a salad. She's gonna toast some buns on this little griddle. And while he's watching the kids and making the patties, he looks across to the tree line and he sees this creature staring at his kid and the puppy. And he said it was like 4 feet tall, but like it was huge, and you could see the sides of its legs as it's crouched down. And to him, it looked like a kangaroo. It had like this short brown hair, it had this snout and these ears standing straight up. And it was, you know, looked like a kangaroo watching his kid. And as they're playing and watching, he's watching this thing, and then it stands up. And it's this bipedal thing that is not a kangaroo at all. He thinks it's about 7 feet tall. And he said that it had these huge pectoral chest, really strong looking, had that snout and the ears and the short brown hair. And he saw this little tail in the back. And he said this thing was like looking at his kid like he was ready to pounce. He was seeing his kid as prey, and it was breathing pretty heavy, like looking at this thing. So he's like, I don't know what the hell that is, but I gotta get my kid and the puppy. So as nonchalantly as he can, he walks out there. He's like, hey buddy, come on, we're gonna go. And he's trying not to get the puppy to run after, you know, the thing. So he scoops up the kid, he grabs the puppy, and they go back to the RV. He puts them down, and the wife is like, oh, is it ready already? Like, I'm still kind of making things. And he's like, no, shh, come here. And he looks out the window, he's like, look. And so she looks, and then she finally gasps when she sees it. And she's like, what is that? He's like, I don't know, but we're getting the hell out of here. So he didn't even break down the grill or anything. He just got into the driver's seat of the RV, closed the door, and took off. He went back the next day to, you know, gather everything up. But he thought it was weird that they were the only ones camping there that day. Usually it was kind of busy. So he wonders if the locals maybe knew something that he didn't. That's the story of the weird looking kangaroo that he saw when he was a kid. Pretty wild. Now, I had since lost connection with this gentleman, which is too bad, because I kind of wanted to follow up and see if anything else had happened or how his kid's doing. And they seem like such a lovely little family that I hope they're okay, and I hope they continue to camp. But I lost touch, yeah.
Have you heard about the stories of the dogmen in Palmyra and Newport?
I have, yeah. The full story of that is written in here, and it's called Werewolf Farm, and it was first documented by Linda Godfrey. And you can also watch a reenactment of the Palmyra Dogman
Mr.
story.
Baldwin, right?
There is that, but also the Sci-Fi Channel had this television show called Paranormal Witness. And there's an episode called Wolfpack, and it covers the Palmyra Dogman. It covers the Palmyra Dogman with reenactments, and it features the actual people. And that was Eric and Shelley Martin, and they lived in Palmyra, Maine. And Eric had gotten into an accident at work and had become disabled and had a really hard time walking. So they wanted to find an area, a home that was a bit more conducive to him needing a bit more room and he could move a bit slower. And they found this farm in Palmyra to rent. Now, their first night there, as they're unpacking, they see these little balls of light out in the woods. And Eric's like, what the hell is that? Like, he was concerned that it was poachers, and maybe poachers with flashlights walking in the woods. So his adult daughter's boyfriend was there, and their son was there, and he asked them to go down and look. So they went down and didn't see anything. There's not even a path or anything down there. It's just thick woods. And they're like, I don't know what that was. So a few weeks go by, and they got into this routine, Eric and Shelley, of sitting out on the porch during the nice nights, and they would have coffee, and she had this big, powerful flashlight that she liked to shine around to look for animals on their property. They never had a property this big. There was a man-made pond right there, and they would often see deer drinking from it and stuff. So they saw some eye shine by this pond, and it looked like something was drinking, but they were seeing this motion. Well, deer don't do that, you know. So they're like, what is that? So she shines the light, And there's this creature there, and it looks up at them, and then it stands up. And it's this tall, bipedal, 7 or so feet tall creature that looks like a werewolf, just standing there. And it's almost like shocked by the light, a deer caught in the headlights, if you will, a dog man caught in the headlights. And it's just looking at them. And then 2 more stand up next to it. And so they're like, oh my God, what the hell is this? And so she shuts off the light, and they go running. And she's like, oh no, where did they go? So she turns on the light again, and she can't find them. But Eric said he saw them go around the house. So she's like, oh God, we gotta get back inside. So they do, they go inside. And she's like, you gotta call the cops. So he does. He calls the police. And they said, well, we're not coming out, and lock your doors. Yeah. Okay. And I know, I'll call the game wardens. They'll know what to do. So he calls the game wardens, and they tell him the same thing. We're not coming out. Lock your doors. And he's like, does this happen often? Like, you know, and they wouldn't answer him. So he gets off the phone, he's like, no one's coming. And she didn't like guns, Shelly. But he had them out in the shed that's next to the pond where the freaking creatures were. And he's like, I'm gonna go out there and get a gun. And she's like, you don't move fast, please don't do this. And he's like, you go upstairs, check on the daughter, because she was upstairs sleeping. I'm gonna go outside. So he goes outside. It takes him forever to move. So now he's on the front porch, and it's pitch black. He doesn't have the flashlight. He's like, okay, I don't hear anything, I'm not seeing anything. So he starts making his way down the porch steps. He's on the last step, and this bright light engulfs him. And he's like, whoa. It's the motion sensor light on the shed where he keeps the guns. He's like, oh, good. Hey, they seem to not like light, so this is good. The light goes out because he wasn't moving. He's like, oh, crap. And so he goes like this to get the light on again. It comes on again, and he sees that these creatures are just on the outskirts of where the light reaches. Like, they're right there. And he's like, I'm not gonna make it. So he turns around, goes back up the steps, goes back in the house, locks the door. Shelly comes and she hollers down. She's like, you get the gun? He's like, no. So she comes down, helps him up the stairs. And so now they're in the daughter's room. She's sleeping. She hasn't even woken up her daughter yet to tell her what's going on. But she's like, look out the window. So they look down, and there's 5 creatures, but there's 6 sets of eyeballs. And so they're looking more closely, and it looks like there's one hugging another one. And he's like, that might be one of their babies. And it was on mom's back looking up. And so they're looking down, they're looking up, and then they scatter. And the rest of the night are these dogmen almost like terrorizing these people, where they're banging on the side of the house and they're scratching. They hear them walking on the roof. But it's like they either don't know how windows and doors work, where they could just barge right in, or they're in the business of just scaring people, you know? But these things never crashed into the windows or anything. It just like caused havoc all night. The daughter eventually woke up and saw what was going on. And so the 3 of them are terrified, and they end up falling asleep, huddled together by the window that they had looked down and saw the creatures. They only slept for like an hour or so, and by this time it's like 5 in the morning, the sun's already coming up. And they look out the window and they're not hearing anything, and I think they're gone. So they go outside and they're looking around, there's nothing, but they're seeing footprints everywhere. They're seeing claw marks in the door and on the sides of the house everywhere. So this scared the hell out of them, and she ended up contacting Linda Godfrey, and there was a whole interview process that took place. While that was happening, they decided that they had to move out of the house. And you ever rented a house to leave like a month later, like you're out a whole lot of money, you know, like the first and last. And it's really tough, but about a month later, they got into another place. For some unknown reason, Linda Godfrey published the address. So, you know, I had to go out there. So I go to check things out. And this is, you know, a bunch of years after this had happened. This was just a couple of years ago, 2023, I think. I went out there with my girlfriend, and she knows the whole story. Well, it turns out this property is literally across the street from a natural wildlife preserve. And all too often, weird footprints are seen going in and out of this preserve. And we happened to be there in the winter, and we saw these huge footprints leading into the woods or leading out of the woods, I don't know. But we took pictures of them, but they really look like melted footprints where a boot had stepped in and then it melts away and makes it look bigger. That's all it could have been. I don't know. But we took like these telephoto pictures of the farm. We felt like such creepers. But right next to this werewolf farm is this church. And it's smaller than this, the church could fit in this room. And it had this really crude wooden cross on the front. Like, it looks like a church out of a Stephen King movie or something, like in a small town that the townspeople built themselves, you know. So that's the parking lot that we're in, taking telephoto pictures of this farm. The farm is now a business, so we didn't really want to like go there and bother them or anything. I mean, even if it was private residence, we wouldn't go on the property and bother them either. But it was interesting that it is a business. I really wanted to talk to them and be like, are you seeing things? But you could see the pond, you know, there was a makeshift fence that was built there. Shelley and Eric had talked about this fence, and that was there. It was just cool to be on site and see this thing and then see these footprints, and there's a nature reserve right there, which could be, you know, indicative of something surviving because there's no hunting over there. I don't know, but that's a brief retelling of the Palmyra dogman, but the full story is in that book. Now, in 2018, these college kids who were really into the Palmyra dogman story decided to go to the woods to camp out in the nature reserve to see if they could see anything. They get out there, they have a little barbecue, all that good stuff, but in the middle of the night, they start hearing these weird howls. Now, they're thinking, it's probably just coyote or, you know, something. But it started getting closer and closer to their camp. So they get outside and they look around, and they claim that there was this shadowy, large figure that they saw, but they didn't actually view a creature. But it scared them so much that they wanted to leave. So they leave and they come back the next day, and they said their campsite was torn apart. It wasn't gone through as though somebody was trying to steal some of their stuff. Like, it was shredded and ripped apart, like something was there and didn't want them there. But that's a little follow-up to the Palmyra dogman you don't hear about too often.
I bet the dogman started the business for recovery.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
For recovery.
Yeah.
Wherever Eric and Sherry,
Eric and Shelley.
Shelley, wherever they ended up, Shelley lets them keep guns in the house.
I bet she does. I bet she does. Now, there's apparently more to the story. I personally spoke with Shelley. Her last name is Martin, Shelley Martin. And I personally spoke to her, and she was, I think she had a difficult time with the sci-fi production team who had covered their story, because she was very arm's length about speaking to other interviewers, you know, and I assured her, like, I'm just trying to find the facts of the story, blah, blah, blah. You know, I'm in your home state, you know, it's not like I'm from California trying to, you know, talk to her. And so that helped her that I was a Maine. But she told me that more stuff happened that she refuses to talk about. She wouldn't even tell me, but she thought there were more paranormal things happening inside the home while there was this dogman stuff happening.
It's like a weekend corner or something.
Yeah, or, you know, kind of like Skinwalker Ranch or something, where all this weird stuff happens over there. I don't know. But, yeah.
There's
But-
a lot more out there than, regardless of what you think of it.
Yeah, I think so too.
It's like humans using only 10% of their brain. I mean, there's so much more going on than what most people are aware of.
Yeah,
And sometimes it just eats over into our reality.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. I do. But those are all the stories I have today. So thank you so much for listening. I know you didn't come here to spend money, but if anybody wants a book, I do have them for sale over here.